Returned from China this past week. I'll have some snippets to share in upcoming weeks, but for this morning, we want to think about strength of the storms of life. You're out in a small boat. You're out on the sea. A storm is tossing you around. You have all you can do not to get capsized, trying to cope with the waves and the wind and the surf. Someone comes along and throws their bags into your small boat and asks you to take care of them for them. Physical storms are among the most violent of storms. Storms occur when two fronts collide, and when a mind's dreams clash with a body's realities, the storm created by that is severe and unrelenting, especially when the physical illness is chronic. To those of you who have had to weather and who have to weather the storms of chronic health issues, I want to express my respect and the awareness of my limitations to say something meaningful to you. I don't suffer physically. I don't suffer chronic physical conditions. Therefore, I cannot touch your reality as it relates to coping with physical storms. JC will come up in a second and do that. He has dealt with, at one point, life-threatening asthma. It becomes an ongoing, so JC will be up in just a second. I would like to help you reject the personal baggage that people, spiritual people, will throw into your boat. People claim to speak for God, and they can innocently or not so innocently say things to make the storm worse. They toss their spiritual baggage into your boat, and in so doing, make your journey more difficult. If I can strengthen your ability to say no to someone who claims to speak for God but does not, that's my piece. And I'd like to be able to offer that in terms of helping. There are some strength-draining discussions. Number one, you must have done something wrong. Secondly, you must not have done something right. Both of these are strength-draining discussions. If you're trying to cope with the realities of physical illness, the last thing that you need is somebody tossing this kind of baggage into your boat. Let's take them one at a time. You must have done something wrong. In the sheet in your worship folder, there are places in the Bible where it seems to make a connection, and in fact does make a connection, between sin and suffering. Look what the sheet says. Verse from the Bible from Psalm 32, David writes, "For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. My strength was sapped, as in the heat of summer. Then I acknowledged my sin to you and did not cover up my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgression to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin." And again, it seems to clearly indicate that there is some kind of physical illness. His strength is sapped. Some type of physical infirmity was connected with a sin that he had committed. And that is what this passage is saying. But then Jesus comes along and brings things into sharper focus. Jesus' clear words are the final chapter in terms of spiritual matters. And his words about suffering are crystal clear. And when Jesus makes a pronouncement that clearly teaches about the truth or untruth of something that is believed, we have to take Jesus for it. Look what he says. As he went along, John 9, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, again, feeling like any kind of physical infirmity, you've got to be able to tie that to a sin. So this was their question. Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And again, the connection that they come to is, well, if this person is suffering some type of disability, and this person had this disability from birth, so who sinned? This guy? Not, but he had it when he was born, or his parents. And Jesus clears the matter up. That's what he says. Neither this man nor his parents sinned. So Jesus takes a clear, sharp knife, and the connection between sin and suffering goes whack. There you go. You cannot connect those two. You cannot connect this person's blindness with somebody's sin. He goes on. But this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. And then Jesus went on to heal him. This is not a contradiction. It is a clarification. You cannot assume that suffering is tied to some sin. And this is the easiest of the two strength-draining discussions to refute. The second one, you must not have done something right. This one's more challenging. The reason is because Jesus' words are recruited to make this case. Look what he says. Jesus said to them, "Only in his hometown, among his relatives, and in his own house is a prophet without honor." He was in his hometown. They said, "Hey, you've done a lot of miracles, but we know you. We know your father. We know your brothers. He's a carpenter, right? Your dad was, so you're claiming to be what? A prophet?" And they don't believe him. Jesus goes on, says he could do no miracles there except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them. And he was amazed at their lack of faith. Well, when we look at this clearly, Jesus is saying the absence of faith explains the absence of miracles in general and healings in particular. That is what the passage says. Goes to a place, he's been doing a number of healings. He goes to this place. They don't believe he is who he is because they're familiar with him. And he says he was amazed he could do no miracles there because of their lack of faith. Ministries that are based on the Bible devote countless hours citing these and other Bible passages to make this case. It's not that you're suffering and you've done something wrong, but if you're suffering, you haven't done something right, which is have the faith in order to be healed. And pointing to passages like this, if you had the faith, you could get healed. And that becomes baggage as well. A closer examination of the Bible, though, raises some, not just questions, but seems to put the matter into sharper focus. And Jesus' words, again, will clarify the matter. What it says, in fact, if you have a Bible, turn to Acts chapter 20. I'm going to read a few portions from that chapter. If you have a Bible, you can turn to it. In Acts chapter 20, Paul is in the midst of one of his ministry journeys, which took him far from home. He's been traveling around. He was in Ephesus just prior to where we catch up with him at this leg of his journey. And in Ephesus, miracles were so abundant that people were just putting handkerchiefs, having Paul touch handkerchiefs, and then these handkerchiefs were transported from Paul. They'll put it on Paul, take the handkerchief, come, bring it to a sick person, and the handkerchief that touched Paul and touched the sick person healed the sick person. That's what's happening. All kinds of miracles are going on. Then in Acts 20, it speaks of those who were accompanying Paul on his missionary journeys. It says he was accompanied by Sopater, son of Pyrrhus, from Berea, Aristarchus, Secundus from Thessalonica, Gaius from Derbe, Timothy also, and Tychicus, and here's the guy, Trophimus, from the province of Asia. There's a reason why I want you to to cue into Trophimus. He is one of the ones that are accompanying Paul. He's one of the missionaries that are traveling with him. What ends up happening, he sends Tychicus and Trophimus ahead, said, okay, you go over to this place, over to Troas, and I'm going to join you. But then he spends a week about 10 miles down the coast. And during that occasion, we read in Acts 20 that he was speaking late into the night. A guy named Eutychus was sitting on the window, and if Paul's over there, Eutychus is sitting on the window, and Paul's going on and on and on and on and on, and Eutychus starts, does some nods and then falls out the window. Dies. And then Paul says, okay, and he puts his speech on hold, goes and says, he's not dead, and he picks him up and raises Eutychus from the dead. And then in Acts 20, verse 15, here's what we read. The next day, we set sail from there and arrived off Chios. The day after that, we crossed over to Samos. On the following day, arrived at Miletus. So what ends up happening? He meets the people that he had sent there at Miletus. And then in Acts chapter, 2 Timothy 4, here's the passage. I left Trophimus sick in Miletus. Wait a minute. Weren't you doing the handkerchief thing? Touch Paul with the handkerchief, bring it to somebody who's sick and they get healed? And then just the week before, you remember the guy falling out the window? You healed him. And now, Trophimus, who was one of your missionaries, you meet him at Miletus, and then you have to leave him sick. I have a question. What in the world is Trophimus doing sick at Miletus? Paul couldn't heal that one? He raised somebody from the dead. Is it that he didn't do something right? He was one of the missionaries. Eutychus was one of the listeners. And digging into the Bible reveals a disturbing trend. Those who are being converted are healed, but the workers are not. Those who are the mature, those who are the ones who have rolled up their sleeves, they're the ones that seem to go without the healings, whereas the new initiates receive them. You doubt me? Look what it says. It talks about Timothy, who, of all Paul's workers, Timothy was one of the ones that was the most faithful. Look at the verse written, "Stop drinking only water," Paul writes to Timothy, "and use a little bit of wine because of your stomach and your..." Do you see what I see? What does that say? Frequent illnesses. I mean, Paul treated Timothy like a son. And basically, rather than say, "Okay, Timothy, I've sent a handkerchief. Here, just put this on the ailing part of your body and get healed." He says, "I'll tell you what, Timothy, drink a little wine. You have stomach problems, and you know that you have frequent illnesses." What in the world is Timothy doing with frequent illnesses? Did he fail to do something right? As Paul would describe him, he is the most faithful Christian that Paul knows. And the only one that Paul can leave in a community and say, "Now I know the message is going to be preserved." Strange. If those who do not do something right, that's the reason why they're healed. Trophimus and Timothy are co-workers. And then there's Paul himself. Look what it says. "To keep me from being conceited because of these surpassingly great revelations, there was given me a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me." And it seems like we don't know exactly what this was. It could have been a relational thing. Many believe it was a physical thing, some type of eye problem, he talks in Galatians, something that made him look not very glorious. If it was an eye problem, some type of oozing something or other that made you have to go, "Eesh." I remember once I was playing baseball. I was not a good baseball player when I was younger, but I went out for some reason because my friends went out. So anyways, this guy hit a screaming high fly, and I go under there, and I just don't know why I did this, but I got it, boink, right in the eyeball. I got this, and then it swelled up like it was just awful. And then I was at the supper table, and my sister said, "Mom, I can't eat. He looks terrible." I remember that. I don't know why. So I know I have to turn around and eat. But that's something like that was the deal with Paul. I don't know. It was something that made it, holy smokes, Paul. Could you just cover the eyeball, will you? He goes on, and people were starting to say, "Wait, time. You're the representative of this gospel. What in the world are you doing looking like that? I mean, you're healing people. Why don't you just put your hands on your own face? Is this real power that you have?" Paul goes on. He says, "3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, but he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses and insults, in hardships, in persecutions and difficulties, for when I am weak, then I am strong.'" Again, these are Jesus' words. And once again, they bring clarity to something that he might have inferred, but now clarifies. Paul says, "You know what, Jesus, you take away this eye problem, and it will not be an obstacle to ministry." And I think that's what the prayer was about. It wasn't about, "God, I don't want to suffer." It's because, "God, this eye thing is bringing your message into disrepute, and please take it away." And what Jesus says to him, "My purpose are best accomplished through that. When you're weak, then my purposes are able to be brought into reality, and my strength is able to flow through one who suffers, not through one who does not. And that seems to be the thing Paul had going for him, was the fact that he was suffering. Again, the weakness is not about, oh, I'm not a great speaker, and that can be, we talk about weakness that way, but when Paul speaks of weakness, it's the absence of strength, the inability to get rid of something that he wants to get rid of. It's powerlessness. That's a better translation. When you are powerless, then you are strong. I think that's what Jesus told Paul. Healings occur, certainly. However, suffering does not mean that you've done something wrong or that you have not done something right. And if you doubt that, ask Trophimus. He got left at Miletus. And it's not that he didn't do something right. Timothy, same thing. Not that he didn't do something right. Paul, same thing. Not that he didn't do something right, but Jesus' purposes are accomplished through one who suffers, seems to be the truth. And the legacy of the Christian church would back that up. There's a woman named Amy Carmichael, born in Ireland in 1867, suffered a nerve disorder that put her in bed for weeks on end. She became a missionary to Japan for a short time, and then to India. There she worked with young women, some of whom were saved from prostitution, spent her life there, used to use coffee to dye her skin to make her look more Indian, and naturally wore Indian clothes. The Danaher Fellowship became a sanctuary for over 1,000 children who faced a bleak future. In 1931, Amy Carmichael was injured in a fall in India, which left her bedridden. She remained bedridden in India for 20 years until she died in 1951 in India. She writes a poem, and JC is going to come up right after I read this. The legacy of, she's not the only one, but she writes, "Have you no scar?" Jesus speaks to us. Have you no scar? No hidden scar on foot or side or hand? I hear you sung as mighty in the land. I hear them hail your bright ascendant star. Have you no scar? Have you no wound? Yet I was wounded by the archers, spent, leaned me against the tree to die, and rent by ravenous beasts that encompassed me, I swooned. Have you no wound? No scar? Yes, as the master shall the servant be, and pierced are the feet that follow me, but yours are whole. Can he have followed far who has no wound, no scar? Can she have followed far who has no wound, no scar?
Y'all looking at your watch? I am. Here's what I want to do. I want to tell you how this applies, and I want to think about a friend of mine. Two of my best friends live in Columbus, Ohio. A guy named Bernie Larson that used to be part of our family here, and a guy named Mark Fredo, who I've known for about 10 years. We train together. We go all over the states training. And he, about 20 months ago, found out that his wife has stage 4 cancer. They told her that she, at best, would have about 24 months, at best. I was just with him about 2 months ago. We were in Standing Rock, and I said, "Mark, how you doing?" He said to me, "I'm doing fine, sort of." He said, "Can you answer me a question?" I said, "What?" Because I asked him, I said, "What's the hardest part about this?" And he said, It isn't the non-believers. He said, can you ask me a question? I said, what? He said, how come we faithful are so stupid when it comes to this stuff? People say silly stuff to me. And I said, what? And he said, they ask these questions that Mike talked about. You know, they either say, keep praying, you're going to get well, or what did you do, or have you been doing? He said, I have a few friends that don't do that. They just let me be. So I entitled this piece in tribute to my friend's wife, a word from Monica. Strength in the face of pain and illness. What I know about pain, Mike asked me to come up because I'm busted up. He asked me to come up because my lungs, you know, if you took an x-ray of my lungs, the biggest guy in here I know is Dave. He's 6'8". My lungs are bigger than his, but they have half the capacity. I went to the doc last year for my yearly checkup. I said, Doc, when I play ball, I get a little swelling in my knee. Did I do anything? And he looked at me and said, no, you're getting old. And what you need to do is take some Tylenol before you play. And he said, oh, by the way, that's going to become a little arthritic. Right? So for me, asthma is the deal, but I don't want to talk about that. When I think about when you've heard somebody say, oh, she's got cancer. Now, I want you to think about not just cancer, but other things. Chronic arthritis, or I know a woman who has migraines every day, lives with it. The pain forces us to deal with a couple of things. When we're faced with pain and illness, we can't dodge some things. One, we can't dodge our mortality. We can't dodge our mortality. We can't dodge the fact that, man, this thing's breaking down. As I get older, it's breaking down. As I get older, I don't weather the cold as well. As I get older, I don't recover as well. When I get sick, they seem to last longer. Or, I don't know how long I can keep going with this knee pain. I don't know how long I can keep going. Monica asked Mark one day, she said, for what? For what? The doc said, we got one more treatment, 2 more treatments. She looked at her husband and said, for what? 2 months? Mortality becomes, I can see the end. But I also understand, because of pain, I'm vulnerable. Some of us get paranoid, take health food, do all kinds of stuff to prevent our vulnerability, but all of us are vulnerable. The scriptures say that our bodies are dying. In 2 Corinthians, Paul writes, we groan because we know that our bodies are dying. But as we die, our spirits are being renewed, is what the scripture says. And we also lose our ability to hold on to time. Time slips away in the moments of pain. Sometimes time is too long. Now, I got a couple ideas I want to share with you and let you out. First of all, Hebrews says we have a great high priest. And if I was talking to Monica, I don't think she'd need to know this, but she has a great high priest. There was a lady named Barb Green who asked me to walk with her to the end of her life. And as she became ravaged by the disease that curled her up and stiffened every muscle in her body, she started to understand, and she started to teach me in her silence that she had a high priest who understands our groaning. Those of you who suffer with pain, I can't take it away. And my asthma isn't the same as whatever. But I know this. The strength that God gives me comes first in knowing He understands my pain. He also understands my emotional reaction to it. He understands I'm angered by it. I'm afraid of it. He understands that it's a cup that's been given us. And He understands that. Hebrews 5 says that. If you want to know the first 4 verses there, write them down. The second thing He gives you if you're in pain. Matthew 11 says, "Come ye who are weary and heavy burdened, and find rest for your soul." I think those of us who struggle in pain, illness, and that'd be all of us at some point in time, need to be surprised by God's rest. He may not take the pain away, but when we hold on to His promises, He will give us rest. He will give us a place where we can groan. And that groaning is understood. It's not shunned. That anger is understood. It's not shunned. That fear is understood. That pain. See, He understands the cup. Says He was tempted by everything. He understands chronic pain. You don't believe me? Look at His last day. He understands having the life drained from Him. And He says God gives us rest. We will find rest for our souls. But this is the most surprising. Paul writes from prison as he has a guard hounding him. And he's writing from prison. And he says, "The peace that passes understanding will guard your soul." Now, here's what I think happens. If you struggle with pain, illness, you will be surprised by peace. It is something that is otherworldly. It is something that's divine. It is something that's supernatural. God will reach in to this finite place and touch you with eternity's peace. And it will stun and shock you. You will also, in that peace, find perspective. See, I think what happens with pain and illness is that we start to understand the difference between here and now and my stuff and getting things and what's really eternal. I think folks who struggle with pain are given a glimpse to something beyond. They start to look forward to. Playfully, we was at the retreat yesterday, and we had Marcia in our group, and they given us this task where plane crashed, and there was 5 of us, and we had to survive. And Marcia said, "I got a jacked up knee. I tell you what, you guys go, I'll stay." I said, "Marcia, we get crashed in northern Canada. It's 25 below." She said, "I'll sing praises, and they'll find me frozen." Smile up like this. But she knows. She said, "My faith will soften the fear of death, and I will welcome it." Because to be frank, when you're in the moment of peace, you can get tired of this. In the moment of peace, my fleshly uniform starts to get old. And I look and I welcome the hand of God. Now, that's what God will promise you. Those 3 things. Last thing I want to say is this, though. That when Jesus was facing His biggest cup, He took the disciples to the Garden of Gethsemane, and they all gathered. And He asked them to stay. And then He got Peter, Paul, and John. And He said, "You 3, come with me." And He said, "You will experience with me the unbearable pain that I've been given. You will experience with me the cup. Come and with me and stand and be vigilant." What I want you to think about is this. Some of you, God's going to call to be garden friends. To be people who have been called to walk with those folks in pain and suffering. You will be the Peter, the John, and the Paul, the Peter, the John, and the James, who've been called to stand alongside and be vigilant. And don't be surprised if you fall asleep. The apostles did. But those are the folks that are called into the deep part of the garden. Those are the people that carry that person when the cup is too heavy. Those are the people that are called to listen to the groans and the pain and the whisper when death comes, if it comes. Sometimes God will call you to be a garden friend. I want to call the worship team up. If you want to see a description of that garden friend, look in Mark 14. Know this, that with this pain, and when we need strength, eternity becomes our strength. God's presence, His power, all that is Him comes to bear on what we need. The stuff we have, the friends we have, go away. We need Him. Listen to the song and then we'll pray.
Father, thankful that you walked with us. You did that. You understand what we deal with because that your Son came, and He came so that He could sympathize with us in our weaknesses and our powerlessness. And boy, chronic pain is so difficult. I'd ask that you would continue to surprise us with peace, that your understanding would promote quietness even in the midst of physical storms. It doesn't make the pain go away, but it gives a sense that we are not alone. Pain is so isolating. We feel so alone in it. And I'd ask that you would, as we continue to know you, would you give us the sense that you're with us? Help us to put our faith in that we are not alone in it, that you walk with us in it. And help us to come alongside those, not give trite platitudes, but to be alongside people and to be genuinely comforting to them. In Jesus' name, amen. Next week we'll